I grew up in a small town in Texas, and I'd gone back and visited a friend, and we went through some of the towns I wrote about, and I was really surprised how much that area had changed since when I was a kid. And all these little vibrant little towns now, so many of the houses were boarded up and people had moved away. It was also a time when oil prices were extremely high. Fracking was now a viable means of extracting oil, and it was really changing the landscape and making it really hard to afford ranching as a way of life. And the people who remained, they were really, really tough people. And so I decided I wanted to tell a story about them and about the modern American frontier today, the West today.
Toby Hansen is really the emotional grounding for the film.
Things are going roughly at the ranch, and our mother just passed away from colon cancer, and Toby has basically been taking care of her, only to find that the bank, in Toby having had to remortgage the house to pay for the medical bills, has completely screwed him over and is about ready to repossess the house because they know that there's oil on the land.
Toby held on to the dream of maintaining the legacy of this ranch, and he finds himself in a situation where the only thing he has is going to be taken from him, which essentially guarantees his children the fate that he has.
Toby is going to try and pay back the bank in order to give the farm to his children, who he hasn't seen for over a year because he didn't have money to pay his alimony or his child support. I think Toby has a lot of amends he needs to make to Debbie and to his children. And I think the first step was him taking care of them financially.
They really represent a cycle of poverty and how success and failure can be handed down generation to generation. A mentality of not thinking about the future because you've never had the luxury. You've only been able to think about tomorrow. From Toby's standpoint, the movie's about ending that cycle.
The only way he can figure out how to buy the house back, essentially, and give some kind of legacy to his children is to rob some banks.
Toby's never committed a crime in his life. His brother's a career criminal. So he asked his brother to help him do the one thing he did pretty well.
Tanner's a little bit crazy, a little bit charming, a little bit fun, a little bit dangerous, and they go about wreaking some havoc in West Texas.
It's interesting, the opening scene of Hell or High Water, we see two brothers robbing a bank. We actually see the differentiation. One has a slightly sadistic nature with the teller, a little bit of a take no prisoners, gets very defensive with her, and the other's trying to keep things calm.
I think Toby is an awful criminal. I don't think he likes pointing guns at human beings, and that's why he had to get his brother, because his brother is fearless and will do fucking anything for his brother and his family.
Whether or not he knows how much time he has, if any of us know, it seems that how he's survived abuse, how he's survived prison, how he's survived a life of hardship, rather than tightening his reins, he loosened them.
I think Tanner is the one who just accepted that he was never going to rise above his station in life, and so therefore doesn't really care if he goes back to prison. I think it's a really, really sad statement that he had lost hope for himself. So the best thing he could do was help his brother give a future to the rest of the family.
It's people operating outside of the law. Are they right or are they wrong? It's a complex question whether or not we root for these brothers, which I think makes the movie really fascinating.
Does the end justify the means? I think it's one of the greatest questions we face, and it affects every aspect of our society.
One of the hearts of the movie is the relationship between brothers, which is a very strong thing, and what brothers are prepared to do to help each other.
At its core, the engine of this film is about brotherly love. Generations of a history of violence. And how do you survive a storm together?
All the shared pain of growing up in the Howard household, the father that was physically abusive to the children and the wife, and a mother who probably tried to protect the father more than she tried to protect the children.
Toby and Tanner, you have people that have been through something so extreme that they really represent the consequence of domestic violence. Tanner sacrificed himself to protect Toby and has basically been living in martyrdom of its own kind for, 2 decades.
It's just about doing the thing that you're asked to because you're doing it for love. And that simplifies everything. It's the great equalizer.
There's elements of protector and failure to protect that are themes of the film. And those same themes are mirrored through the relationship between the two Texas Rangers. In Texas, there is a reverence for the Rangers that is very different from any other police organization I know. And one of the reasons is the way that they began was as protectors and not policemen. I mean, they were protectors of the prairie. They were the protectors of West Texas, and still are to this day.
Their sole purpose is to protect person and property has been robbed. So this is what they live for.
Alberto Parker, who's my partner in this wants me in on the case because he knows this could be the last one for me, and it could be a good one. Marcus just got a letter from the higher-ups telling him it's time to shut it down and retire, and he spent his whole life getting the bad guys and solving crimes, and he's got this one last hunt.
Marcus doesn't want to go quietly away. He's still a pretty vital man with still a lot of smarts left in him, and Marcus has lost his wife, and he needs a reason to keep living.
Alberto, he's half Comanche and half Mexican, and Marcus enjoys teasing him on both of those accounts.
I want to make people think, gosh, why in the world would this guy insult his friend that way? Why would he do that? Marcus, who's from another generation, doesn't know how to show his affection because the only person Marcus has is Rodriguez. He has no family. He has no friends. He was dedicated to his job. So he doesn't know how to express his affection. And so he does it through insults, which is a really common and really unhealthy way to do it. And of course, the tragedy for Marcus is that he never does tell his friend how he really feels. It's a cycle, and he articulates it very clearly when he says, all this land was Comancheria. This was my people's lands until your ancestors came along and took it from us, and now it's being taken from you. But it's not another race coming in and doing it. It's the banks. It's greed.
When it gets down to it, as humans, we're a pretty ruthless bunch, you know. When somebody else is doing it to you, it looks like they're the bad guys, and when you're doing it to them, you know, you're the good guy.
I'm very influenced by that notion of who am I supposed to be rooting for, and rooting for people in spite of what they're doing and rooting against people in spite of what they're doing. I just find it creates a real rich, thoughtful experience for the audience to sit there and go, gosh, what would you do?
Hopefully it'll put our condition in perspective and let us understand the human condition a little better.
It's not until the story turns a bit dark, when the bank robberies become more violent than Toby wants, that I think Marcus starts to have more of a solemn approach to it. When he loses Rodriguez, it changes for him. Now he has a vendetta.
Amidst all of this chaos, there are these two really quiet moments when Marcus is basically trying to metabolize the fact that the purpose of his life is ending. He sees the vision of himself sitting on a couch watching television. He can't abide it. And then there's Toby in the casino staring off into the kind of vastness of his life. For Marcus, it's all about what could have been and things coming to an end. And Toby's life is done, basically. He's sacrificed himself for his kids. I'll always love that scene on the porch at the end because it was without malice. It was one man protecting the only thing that is his own, which is this land and his family. And he will not let this man take it away from him. And a man trying to be righteous and do right by his friend.
I think at the very end of the movie, he's still suffering from the loss of Rodriguez, his partner, in the same way that Toby will be suffering with the loss of his brother.
Those two last lines of the film are some of my two favorite lines. Man, it's just so cowboy. It's so, it's not angry, it's not mean. It's the kind of tragic, sad acceptance of reality, of this is the only way it could have been.
I really want to put you in a situation where you're unsure who you want to win and still leave you conflicted at the end. And you realize that no one left from this unscathed. No one won anything.
The thing that is really interesting about the script is that it seems to have a very strong sense of place, a very strong sense of identity, a strong sense of the environment, and it adds up to something that feels very cinematic.
I think the film is in all sorts of ways about land, and it's about the family land and what land does to people's identity. It's a huge sort of presence in the film. The first thing I did when I took on the job was take a road trip through Texas and New Mexico with Giles, the DP on this film, and Tom Duffield, the production designer. And it was an idea of mine just to kind of rapidly inform us about the world we were trying to describe, and for us just to kind of be inspired by the landscape. The landscape is an essence, and in this particular case, a foreigner DP, foreigner editor, foreigner director, all just being really struck by that land.
I think that because they're not from here, things that I may think are mundane or have driven past 50 times and don't notice, that are perfect representations of the world, they're fascinated by. So I think David's view of this was a very clear, unprejudiced look at the world and at the story.
David Mackenzie, I think, just falls in love with the worlds of the movies he's doing and likes to just soak himself up in it. And in fact, when we first started talking about New Mexico, because that was where we were inevitably going to shoot, and he said, you know where I want to go first? I want to go to Texas. I want to go to these real towns.
I scouted Texas and all the places mentioned in the movie before coming to New Mexico and have been keeping in mind the flavors wherever possible. There's a poverty and decay in the script that we were able to find here, the old banks that have closed down or feeling like they're nearly closing down. That was a really important part of this film.
David wanted the sense of the desolation in some of these small towns that are kind of getting rubbed out by the big towns, all the little downtowns that are just kind of evaporating.
Action.
All of this film was shot in real locations. There was no bills, there was no set. My last film was set in a prison, and we shot in a prison. And it's like the less you have to fake, the more real the whole thing becomes for everyone. And so you turn up to work and you're already halfway there.
You get the reality of everything. You get the grit, you get the grass growing out of the pavement.
Action!
Everywhere when there's dust, and it does give a real texture that you don't get if you're doing them on stage.
As well as Giles and myself, Tom's involvement in the selection of visual elements of the film is really important. There were a lot of banks that weren't forthcoming in terms of letting us shoot there. 2 banks did, and they were very, very kind in Clovis, New Mexico. Other banks, we needed to find former banks and turn them back into banks. Tom let the reality breathe, but also was just subtly kind of changing it and bending it to try and make it all feel more coherent.
In the movie, I tried to go for earthy colors. Like if you look in here, it's kind of an earthy brown in here. Because my concept was, it's all about the land in this movie. The boys are protecting the land, so I can use earth tones throughout the movie. David liked the backyard expanse of Debbie's house that we had and the weeds growing up, and we wanted to make it look untouched. So I made a really strong point with production, stay off the grass. We wanted it to be pristine, like it hadn't been touched for years.
I was really worried that you got 50 people walking through that landscape. It's going to look like a film crew being there, because it was pretty wild, that place. So we had to kind of put paths to make sure the crew didn't tread on that grass.
We were always going for that dry, dusty West Texas look. And I kind of always was referring to HUD, the Paul Newman movie, because they got great dust, and he drives that big Cadillac around. We've gotten the feeling of the heat. It's one thing to look out there and take a look, but you don't feel it till you see that dust coming up behind the car.
When you're a production designer and the game is not to build things, the game is to take what's there, augment it, change it in terms of color and all those kind of things. And Tom's instincts were superb throughout the film. The thing that both Giles and I really felt about that landscape was how impressed we were about how uncluttered it was. You stand on a porch and you look over this horizon and there's nothing to see.
That was the big thing we always tried to maintain, that really wide look. And Giles and I framed a couple of shots. You get a little thing in the foreground, a little thing in the middle ground, and a farm way off in the distance.
The bigness of the landscape and the smallness of the people is definitely part of the point of what we're trying to express.
We knew that even though this movie needs to really capture the scope and the landscape beautifully in a quiet way, that the heist elements of it needed to have a very dynamic feel to it. So the combination of the raw brutality with the emotion and his ability to visually capture a world was really exciting to us.
I'm trying to make everything feel as real as possible. When you have an action scene, you have a sex scene, you're less real by definition, because you've got to fake more. So I was trying my hardest to make the action elements feel as real as possible and not feel glamorous. But at the same time, we needed to make it work. There's a scene in the film where Chris Pine defends his brother from a guy who's being a bit of an asshole. We tried hard to make it feel as authentic as possible. Quick and messy is what violence kind of is generally. So if it looks kind of balletic and beautiful, which a lot of films do, then you're not really being very honest to what it is. There are times when we had stunts and all those kind of things. There are moments where I do a shot list where I need to for the sake of due diligence, but not very often. Giles and I never talk about shots. Our prep is to go through film scene by scene and talk about what the scene means. That's how we prepare. I like to keep myself open and see what the day brings, rather than pre-plan or have any kind of sort of pre-visualization or anything, because I find those things solidify an idea before you've actually got all the ingredients to see what the idea is.
He also had the gift of the world around us. So he'd say, let's put the brothers in this field right now. This isn't in the script, but let's have them doing something playfully because it's a great moment to silhouette them. He looked for those little opportunities.
I'm trying to get it so I don't see that edge.
Giles and I have made 5 films together. I try very hard to make a different film each time, and with a different kind of look. The light of the environment that we're trying to represent is very much a part of it.
The technology is incredible. So we're using a lot of available light or reflectors. Giles is certainly supplementing that. But the environments speak for themselves.
that high, hard light that actually a lot of DPs don't like. They think it's too brutal. Was something that I actually really quite like that. And so we tried to take advantage of those hard shadow, high sun elements. You can actually feel some heat in the film, which I quite like. There's a scene in the film in a motel room with Marcus and Alberto. You know, it's at night and it's kind of moody night light. You know, with the lights that are in the hotel, but it's got a real kind of feeling to it. Part of sort of Giles's mastery of lighting is what was there, using the reflection off the wall and just playing with the material. Taking on this film was a kind of gift to me in many ways, and part of that gift was to be able to kind of join the continuum of American films about people, about land, some of the great themes in American cinema which this film taps into. Well, the script is set in West Texas, and it's very much an Americana story, and I was really drawn to that. I like kind of Americana elements, you know, like the music of it, and I spent a little bit of time in West Texas before, and sort of wanted to make a movie there, but didn't know what it was, and so when I read this script, it just felt right. It felt, you know, all the elements were there. It's a very strong story. It had a lovely arc to it. It had a very strong sense of place, great characters, great dialogue, and you know, I really loved it. So, you know, me as a British filmmaker, having to kind of go into America and try and represent America as honestly as possible was a real challenge, but one I really enjoyed. I mean, I really tried not to make a kind of outsider version of an American film. I really tried to make an American film, and surround myself with as much kind of American attitude as possible. So that's what we try to do. And I'm really pleased that people in Texas kind of really feel that it's kind of captured the Texas. So we've obviously done our job right. So I'm happy about that. We shot a lot of those. We shot almost all of the stuff with Chris and Ben sequentially. So the very first shot of the film was the first shot of the film. It was the first shot of our schedule. So it's, you know, hitting the ground running. It was quite sort of scary, but we were fortunate to find one or two banks that let us shoot in the real thing, and then other banks that were former banks. So each one was a real bank. And I did a little bit of research about the realities of those things, trying to get things together, and then just did it. You know, it was quite an organic process. It's interesting. I mean, I don't think the film is a Western anyway. I mean, I think it's partly a Western. It does deal with Western themes, but it's also a road movie and a buddy movie and a, you know, American crime story and a social commentary. You know, as well as actually kind of, you know, got some, you know, some quite strong comedic themes. So it's all, filmmaking is always about sort of juggling all the things that are going on, and just, you know, trying to be conscious of those things. So it was as with all of the process for me, it's kind of an organic thing. It's about trying to feel your way through, and there's a lot of intuition involved and a lot of thinking on your feet. So I guess that's what we were doing. You start the film with kind of bank robberies and danger, and then it kind of it becomes something else for a while, and then it kind of re-engages with being a kind of thriller, I guess. You know, so once that started happening, it's about getting the energy and the tension and all those things, you know, working. There's a lot of movement. There's some of the camera work is trying to be very fluid. It's, you know, and those things are all part of what you're trying to do to get the, I guess, the excitement of those tension scenes to work. You're quite limited in what you can do in car stuff, and we tried a lot of kind of, you know, moving vehicle to moving vehicle stuff, and a lot of moving around cars, and then trying to get, you know, that dynamic to work with dialogue. You know, it's quite a lot of kind of coordination there, and that was definitely a challenging part. The last scene of the film, Chris's last scene and Jeff's first scene, and you know, we shot it in one day. It was, I think, 8 pages of dialogue, and there's quite a lot going on. That was a challenging day. A lot of the days where it was very hot, you know, that was, you know, it just kind of saps your energy a bit. But really, I had a great time making the film, and I didn't feel like it was particularly challenging. It was just felt really good, you know. So each day had its own set of challenges, but nothing felt kind of uncomfortable or overwhelming or anything.